Thank you so much for the invite. It's really nice to be here. So, yeah, my name's Emily. I'm from the UK. Please shout if I start talking too fast. I have a tendency to do that. I've been working on public perceptions of enhanced weathering for quite a long time now. I've heard so many things this morning that already speak to many of the things I'm going to touch on. So the challenge is going to be to stick to the slides so that I don't go over time. So I hope that I don't have to tell any of you that the importance of society and communities is now very widely acknowledged. This is an enhanced weathering workshop, so I put a quote from David Beerling in there. He says, ultimately, public perceptions may prove to be just as important for the future of enhanced weathering as technical considerations. Myself and my colleagues now have a body of evidence on the public perceptions of enhanced weathering, spanning about 7 years. We've done work in 5 specific countries, plus also some work using global data sets as well. So I'm going to talk through some of these and try and draw out some sort of generalized conclusions about public perceptions. So first off, this is work that we did in the UK, the US and Australia with my colleagues Elspeth and Nick at Cardiff University, which we've published quite a few papers out of these data sets. So I think the headline thing that we found is that people now see climate change as urgent and immediate. This won't come as a surprise to us, but if you're a psychologist, psychologists generally think people see climate change as distant, something that's far away, far in the future. We actually found that this has shifted. And this obviously has implications for novel carbon removal techniques. So we found that people see them both as too long term, in other words, they won't be ready in time, but at the same time, they're not long term enough. So they're not addressing broader sustainability concerns about the way in which our societies and our economies are operating. We call this kind of temporal dilemma in novel CDR techniques. And conditionality is key. So in other words, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And when it comes to enhanced weathering specifically, the energy requirements come up an awful lot. There's a particular focus on life cycle impacts and, is it removing as much CO2 as we're putting in for the mining and the transport and everything like that. Speaking of that topic of opening new mines for the rock resource, we find that there's a real emphasis on using byproducts rather than opening new mines. Something that we found was that actually health concerns were kind of less prevalent than we expected. We thought health concerns were going to be quite a major issue for public perceptions of enhanced weathering. They kind of weren't. They came up a little bit in some contexts, but not in all. The thing that really did surprise us, the thing that we were not expecting, was how much people focused in on the oceans, right? We know now, of course, that people feel quite an emotional connection to the ocean, and that this leads to heightened risk perceptions of anything that has an ocean interaction. We didn't know that at the time. Of course, when you ask someone, okay, where does the carbon go with enhanced weathering? The end story is ideally, we hope that it ends up in the ocean, right? We weren't expecting people to focus in on this, but they really went, oh, I don't like the idea of anything that's messing with the ocean at all. And so we've been saying throughout this that there's a real need for more understanding of ocean impact on the assumption that we were doing this at scale, because it's no good saying to people, oh, well, we're only doing this at field scale, so we wouldn't expect to see a signal in the ocean. That's, of course, true, but the next response is going to be, yeah, but if you want this to be a climate technique, surely we need to do it at scale. So what happens there? So often when people discuss something that's novel, further discussion, further knowledge can increase their negativity towards it. We found this with geoengineering, with carbon capture and storage, with fracking, with loads of other analogous technologies. And or it tends to polarize the discourse, right? The more people discuss, the more polarized they become. We actually found the opposite for enhanced weathering. We found that the more people discussed it, the more their attitudes towards it actually improved. We dug into the data and we found that this seemed to be due to it seeming more real to people as they discussed it more, and therefore more feasible. So any efforts to make enhanced weathering feel more real to people, for instance, via linking it with real life demo projects, or for instance, by communicating real-time data from projects that are actually happening. I will say, though, that this effect depended on people's general attitudes to information coming from scientists, information coming from what they perceived to be kind of elite groups. If you don't trust elites, then you're not going to become more favourable due to information that's provided by those elites, right? The thing that we've been working on more recently is we've gone to Malaysian Borneo. This is with the same team at Cardiff, plus our Malaysian collaborators at the Leverhulme Trust and also at the Southeast Asian Rainforest Research Partnership. And so enhanced weathering might work best in warm, humid climates. It can also bring benefits to soils, which might be particularly important in places which are highly weathered and in tropical soils, which tend to be degraded and highly acidic. Therefore, somewhere that's been posited as a location for enhanced weathering is tropical managed agriculture, right? However, there's hardly any research on public perceptions in these locations. So we're talking about deploying a technique in places where nobody's actually thought about how people might respond to this technique, right? If you're talking about tropical managed agriculture, probably palm oil comes up in that conversation somewhere. Malaysia is the world's second biggest palm producing region, and the state of Sabah on Malaysian Borneo has a major palm oil economy. Therefore, we went over there, we did some field work, we did some workshops with people all over the state, including in the main palm growing region. So my colleague Elspeth is in charge of going through all of the data from all of those workshops. So I'm not going to talk about that here because the analysis is still ongoing. The bit that I'm in charge of, right, is the bit that we did at the end of a day-long workshop. We had our expert, who's Robin Lim, who's working on the Sabah field trials. We sent Robin out of the room, and then we asked people if they had any questions that they wanted to ask him. We wrote the questions down. We asked people what their reasoning was for asking these questions. These are all of the questions that they asked. Some of them are in English, some of them are in Bahasa Malay. We're using this to develop a methodology. At the moment, I'm calling it question-led innovation. I'm not sure about that name. I'm open to suggestions. The idea is to shape the future of enhanced weathering research, not just social sciences, but also natural sciences and all of the sciences that are involved in enhanced weathering, to actually shape that research so that it prioritizes the questions which matter the most to the people on the ground. Again, I'm not going to go through this in detail because there's a lot going on this slide, and thinking about it, those graphs are really small. The headline outcome, I guess, is that actually we found that a lot of the current research that's going on into enhanced weathering is actually in line with what our participants most wanted to know about. They were really interested in the minerals, they were really interested in the rock resource, they're really interested in where it was coming from, how it was being processed, and so forth. However, other areas of interest represent major knowledge gaps. For instance, questions about life cycle assessment, you know, how much carbon is removed and is it more than is being produced by the quarry, etc. Monitoring, reporting, verification, questions about how do you actually track the carbon as it moves through the system and how can we be sure that it's ending up where it is ending up, and also cost. The impacts on the ocean, as I said, they come up in every single context that we do this work in. We argue that they remain a gap in knowledge. And we also found that people focus on socio-economic factors, things about governance and regulation. Certainly in the Malaysian context, we don't have very much information on this at all. And so this could be a priority for further research. So let's go to the coast now. I'm actually not sure if we're supposed to be considering coastal enhanced weathering in this workshop, but I put this slide in anyway. So we've been doing some work in the Dominican Republic with Project Vesta, looking at coastal enhanced weathering in small island developing states. So small island developing states are particularly vulnerable to climate impacts. They're also at the very forefront of global climate action, right? They're really important players in this space. Coastal enhanced weathering could potentially bring adaptation benefits to coastal regions. Therefore, we've been doing a 3-year project of community engagement in rural Dominican Republic, which is led by local researchers there. We found that the communities are really worried about their local economy due to challenges that are caused by climate change and other environmental impacts that are happening, particularly with fishing, which has been much, much more challenging, and subsistence farming. And therefore, any benefits from enhanced weathering to diversify local economies could be really crucial in these areas. But of course, there are big questions about how the benefits get distributed and who is actually going to be benefiting from any money that's being made in this system. And of course, you know, it's important to understand and respect people's cultural responsibilities. The communities we talked to have very particular cultural responsibilities to their community and also to their natural environment. Just finally, I'm going to go a bit more global now. So we've been doing some work on social media perceptions. So social media is a bit different from the work that we do elsewhere. Instead of going to a community or a population and saying, what do you think about this? This is people who are providing this information themselves. It's non-elicited data, right? And so I've been doing this work with my colleagues at the Mercator Institute in Berlin. And it's come out it's in the State of CDR report edition 1, and it will be in the updated report that's coming soon. So the headline is that attention to enhanced weathering on Twitter, now X, is extremely low. So enhanced weathering is purple, right, on that left bar. It's not the purple that you can see. The purple that you can see is direct air capture. The purple that you can't see is enhanced weathering. We see that Twitter is really dominated by conventional biogenic methods, right? So it's really dominated by afforestation, soil carbon sequestration, ecosystem restoration, and so forth. Enhanced weathering sort of barely gets a look in, and again, you can see that on the grey bar right on the right-hand side here. Saying that, of the tweets that we did find, you know, I can't remember the exact number, it's sort of 10,000 or thereabouts. Of the tweets that we did find on enhanced weathering, the sentiment was very, very positive, and more positive than a lot of other techniques. We also found that it's trending slightly positive over time. So the sentiment analysis, we went back to 2010 and looked at the change over time from 2010 to 2022, which was when Twitter kind of finished. And yeah, we find that sentiment towards most CDR techniques is trending positive, and enhanced weathering is also trending positive. So just to wrap up, so I'll try and summarize all of these studies into one slide, which means I've very arbitrarily picked the key conclusions that I'm most interested in. So interest in enhanced weathering is growing rapidly in the scientific community. However, many of the proposed locations are completely lacking any social science work whatsoever. This reflects the CDR situation more broadly, in that we see a persistent geographical skew toward Western Europe, North America, Australia, and New Zealand, and away from exactly the tropical locations where some of these techniques might be deployed. We find that public awareness and familiarity is consistently really, really, really low. I will say, though, it's really difficult to track these over time because all of the studies use different measures for awareness and familiarity, which means that you have no consistent data to draw on, right? So some longitudinal research that can track these over time would be absolutely great. And attention on Twitter or X is very, very low, although with a very positive sentiment and trending positive over time. Some things which seem to hold true across all of the different geographical contexts that we've looked at are that, for a start, people really dislike the idea of opening new mines, and secondly, are deeply concerned about any potential ocean impacts of enhanced weathering. We're developing this question-led innovation method, and the idea is to identify knowledge gaps which could then inform the next phase of enhanced weathering research. And these include the ocean impacts, the MRV, the life cycle assessment, the cost both at local and national scale, and also the governance structures that would be required to incentivize this and also to regulate it. And then finally, our work in the Dominican Republic really focused on developing a methodology for participatory governance of enhanced weathering. And we basically advise that this is used when preparing for trials and for deployment, and particularly in climate vulnerable contexts. So thank you for listening. I want to do one plug, which I should have put on my slide, but I forgot. So the State of CDR report, which I've seen on a few slides already, volume 2 is coming out on the 4th of June. We're having a launch event on the 4th of June, if any of you would like to join us online. We've got new chapters, we've got new data, we've got a new publicly available data portal and all kinds of shiny things. So yeah, if you want details, come and find me. Thank you.